What are we discussing on today's podcast, you ask? Well, we're ranking all 30 MLB teams, putting them into tiers, and deciding where the D-backs land, all on today's Locked On Diamondbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, listening to who? The always charismatic host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. If you want to see more content by me, just follow me on Twitter at CreatorThomas24 from my personal account, or just look up Locked On Diamondbacks, both Twitter, Instagram for the podcast handle. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Diamondbacks your first listen every day. Would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free and available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. One of those platforms is YouTube, so please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. We're getting very close to 400 subscribers. We're just climbing there slowly, so please hit subscribe on the Locked On Diamondbacks YouTube channel. And before we get started, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. Let's put all 30 MLB teams into tiers. And for some of these tiers, I have some March Madness related tier names. I just want to make it fun. We're in March Madness time. I'm not a big college basketball guy myself, but I will watch a few games, especially when they have the top prospects in it. But I want to start at the top, or should we start at the bottom? I don't know, but I do think it's more fun a lot of times to start at the top. And the top tier I have, this is the championship or bust tier. These are the teams that if they don't win the World Series this year, it will be considered a disappointment for their season. The first team I have in this tier is the Atlanta Braves, because me and Sully did the podcast earlier the week, making the case against all the NL teams that made the playoffs last year to not make it this year. And I think the Braves arguably might have been the hardest team to make the case against not making the postseason this year, because you look at that lineup, stacked with studs, the Acuñas, the Rileys, the Alstons. You're adding studs like Michael Harris in their second year on a great value deal. Look at that rotation with the Freeds, and now you got Spencer Strider in there. The bullpen is good too. Like, there's not really a weakness on this Atlanta Braves team. And if this team doesn't win a World Series, I think it would be disappointing. Now, they did win a World Series not too long ago, just a couple years ago, but I just love the way this Braves franchise front office is building this thing, locking up all their young stars, deciding who they want to keep, who they want to let go. Like, I think it was really smart that they didn't lock up Dansby Swanson, because I think that's a player that you don't want to put on a long-term deal. So I think this Braves team is really smart. They're loaded with talent, lineup, rotation, bullpen, and if they don't win a World Series, I think it should be a disappointment in their eyes. The second team I have here is the San Diego Padres, and for the Padres, I mean, the case is very easy. Why championship or bust? I mean, no team arguably spends more money than the Padres. No team is arguably more aggressive than the Padres, and they've unloaded all their prospects basically, and for good reason. You brought in Juan Soto, you brought in whoever else, the Blake Snells, the Musgroves, the Yu Darvishes of the world. You signed Michael Wacha to round out your rotation this season. You got a core four in your lineup: Soto, Bogarts, Tatis, Machado, and still got guys like Jacob Cronenworth in your lineup. Like, this Padres team is absolutely loaded. Maybe their bullpen isn't as good as some other teams' bullpens, but their rotation is going to have 3 legit dudes in it. Their lineup is going to have maybe the most stacked superstar lineup I've seen in a while. You could make the argument with the Dodgers of the past couple of years, but that top 4 in the Padres lineup, I think, is better than any top 4 the Dodgers have had in the last 10 years. So the Padres are definitely on the tier of championship or bust. The third team I have here is the Houston Astros. And the Astros, I mean, they are still in championship or bust mode, but they also have a little bit reprieve. They have a little wiggle room because they are the Houston Astros, and no team has been more dominant since 2017, since the banging of the trash can, since the Houston Astros, because since they quote unquote cheated in the World Series, they've been to 2 more. They've won 1. They've been to at least the American League Championship Series every single season since 2017. So it's championship or bust for the Houston Astros because they are also loaded. Like, this is a team that lost Justin Verlander, and they still have Valdez, McCullers, Urquidy. I'm definitely missing a starting rotation member. Like, their rotation is still pretty stacked. That lineup with Yordan Alvarez, Altuve is going to miss a couple months, but Kyle Tucker, the stud, Jeremy Pena had a really good rookie season. I'm definitely missing some other guys as well. And they got so many rookies like Hunter Brown coming up this year. They have a really good bullpen. Like, this Astros team from top to bottom is good. They're also a team like the Braves that are not afraid to let some good players go in free agency, like the Correas, like the Carlos Correas and the George Springers of the world. This Astros team is absolutely loaded. And until this reign of dominance stops, I think they should be in championship or bust mode every single season. 4th team is the New York Mets because the Mets love to spend money, and they would have spent more money if Carlos Correa had a good knee, but even without that, they still spent so much money on Justin Verlander. Went out there and got that Japanese pitcher. They spent some more money to round out their lineup as well. And you look at their team, I don't think their team is as stacked as maybe some other teams. I don't like the compilation of parts as much as some other teams like the Braves or the Padres or the Astros, but the Mets still have a really good roster. And with the amount of money that they're spending, Stephen Cohen is not going to be happy with anything less than a World Series appearance. The Mets still have a ton of talent. Pete Alonso, Lindor, Starling Marte. They got a deep rotation with the Scherzers and the Verlanders and the Sengas. They even signed Jose Quintana. Like, the Mets are definitely in championship bust, just like this other New York team who is just dying to get to a World Series and dying to win one, because it's been since 2009 since the Yankees have at least been to a World Series. Like, not just win, just been to one. And it's been over 20 years since they won one. And this Yankees team, like, look, there's a lot of money committed to this Yankees team, and you got the Aaron Judges of the world. You got Stanton. You just signed Carlos Rodon, who's already hurt. You don't like to see that, but this Yankees team, if you're the New York Yankees with the 27 rings, this is arguably the most glamorous franchise in all of sports, and this franchise is always going to be in championship or bust mode, as they should be, as one of the top dogs in all of sports, the most rings in all of sports, and with a lineup and a rotation and the money spent. Like, this is the New York Yankees we're talking about. They have to be at the top, and it's been a while. It's been a while since the New York Yankees have been at the top, but they have if they have a healthy Carlos Rodon, I love the Cole, Rodon, Nestor Cortez as your top 3. Their lineup should still smash with the Stantons and the Aaron Judges of the world. And maybe they get a guy like Anthony Volpe, rookie, to have a breakout season. And they always figure out their bullpen somehow. The Yankees always have a really strong bullpen behind them. So Yankees, definitely championship or bust. And then my last team in this tier, I have 6 teams in the championship or bust tier. My last team is the LA Dodgers, just because they've been on a decade of dominance in terms of winning division, winning 95 to 105 games every single season, but only one World Series to show for it during the 2020 COVID shortened season. A little fluky. They have a whole bunch of other World Series runner-ups. So I think the Dodgers want to win one outside that COVID shortened season, so people like me don't discredit it. And of course, they let a lot of talent leave this free agency, from the Andrew Heaney's, Tyler Andersons, the Trey Turners of the world, of course, but they're still going to have a very stacked lineup with the Mookies and the Freddie Freemans and the Will Smiths, and you're still going to have Julio Urias and Tony Gonsolin and Clayton Kershaw in your rotation, and still have a whole bunch of arms in your bullpen. So I'm never going to feel bad for the Los Angeles Dodgers. I don't care how many people left that team. They are still in championship or bust mode. They are still stacked with MVP and Cy Young candidates. And for that reason, those are my 6 teams in the championship or bust category: Braves, Padres, Astros, Mets, Yankees, and Dodgers. And if you think any of those teams are going to win the World Series, you need to head to FanDuel Sportsbook to place that bet, because the tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. You can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. I feel like my enunciations have been terrible today. I feel like I'm just slurring my words like I had 3 beers before I came on today. My pronunciations are just not crisp today. And I don't know why. Maybe I got too much saliva in my mouth, but let's continue with my tiers who just did championship or bust. Next tier I have up is what's wrong with second? These are the teams that want to go deep in the playoffs, have a deep postseason run, but if it ended in the World Series like the Padres or Phillies last year, they won't be too upset. They just want to be in the mix in the World Series with a chance to win it. First team I have here is the Philadelphia Phillies, who, like I just said, I think if they had another season where they got to the World Series and lost, back-to-back seasons where you lose in the World Series would feel pretty bad, but I also think it would be another successful season considering, Bryce Harper under the knife, just had Tommy John surgery, going to be out until at least All-Star break. The rest of your team is pretty much stable from last year. Plus, you added Trey Turner. Kyle Schwarber's coming off that monster season. You want to bounce back from Nick Castellanos. You still got great frontline rotation with the Nolas and the Wheelers. Hopefully, your bullpen can continue to play well like it did at the end of last season. But for this Philadelphia Phillies team, a lot of money committed, and I don't think it's championship or bust for Philadelphia. I think the fact that they were at least in the World Series last year does give them a little wiggle room, and I think another World Series appearance would make it a successful season. And I just don't see them in the tier of teams that should win it all, because even though they got to the World Series last year, they were just like a 88-win team or whatever they were. So Phillies I have in this tier, along with the Toronto Blue Jays, who just acquired my guy Dalton Varsho, and maybe they should be in the championship or bust here with how much money they've committed, because they got a pretty stacked rotation with they just signed Chris Bassett, already had Kevin Gausman there. Also gave Jose Barrios a whole lot of money. You got Vlad Guerrero, you got Bo Bichette, you just traded for you traded away Teoscar Hernandez, but you just traded for Dalton Varsho. Like, I think this lineup and rotation is very stacked. The only reason I don't think a championship or bust is just because, have they ever been to a World Series? I would have to honestly check it because I don't know off the top of my head if they've ever been to a World Series. I think I have the Blue Jays pulled up somewhere, but if you're the Blue Jays, like it's been a while since you've gone deep into the postseason. I just think a season where you have a deep run will be very good, because the Blue Jays, looking at it now, haven't won a World Series since '93, and they were in 2 championship series in 2015 and 2016, but they only have 4 playoff appearances since that World Series in '93. Only 4 since '93. So in the last, 30 years, they have 4 playoff appearances. So that's why I'm like, if they make it to a World Series and lose, I think Blue Jays fans would be very happy. And then third, I have the St. Louis Cardinals, who are kind of like, not the New York Yankees, but like kind of that mystique kind of team with a lot of success and always pretty good. But I don't think they have to win a World Series to have a successful season. They got so much young talent. You got the MVP, you got the runner-up, or Nolan Arenado. I don't remember if he finished second or third, but you got those 2 guys with all these rookies. But it's also a transitional year. No more Pujols, no more Yadier Molina, and another season of Adam Wainwright getting old. If you somehow rode Adam Wainwright to a World Series and lost, I think you would be pretty happy as a Cardinals fan. Paul Goldschmidt, just seeing him on a World Series stage, I think that would make him pretty happy. I don't think he even feels like he has to win the World Series. I think he would be pretty happy with a runner-up appearance as well. So for these 3 teams, the Phillies, Blue Jays, and Cardinals, like, I think all their fan bases, I think the players would all be pretty satisfied with a World Series appearance. All of them. I mean, the Blue Jays don't have a lot of recent success, only 4 playoff appearances in the last 30 years. That's why I think they would be so happy to make it to a World Series. The Phillies just made it to a World Series, but before last year, it was the longest drought in the National League for not making the postseason. So that's why I'm like, they still haven't had that much playoff success in the last 12 years. Then the Cardinals, they do have a lot of playoff success, but because it's a transitional year with so many dudes who meant so much of the franchise leaving, I think it would just spiritually it would just feel really good if the Cardinals made it to the World Series this season. Then the next tier I want to do before we wrap up today is the Final Four, please tier. Final Four, please. These are the teams that would just be happy making it to the Final Four. They don't need the World Series. A World Series would be great, but if they made it to the Championship Series, I think that's all they need. The first team is the Seattle Mariners, who is coming off a season where they just broke the longest playoff drought. That would be linear success. You break the longest playoff drought, you make it to the first round, and I don't remember, did they win or lose their first round series? Whatever it was, they didn't make it to the Championship Series last year. So you have the drought broken last year, you have some playoff success last year, and then you take another step forward this season and make it to the Championship Series. And then next year, you tell your fans, all right, now we're going to the World Series. That's our next goal. It would be incremental baby steps for this young franchise, the Seattle Mariners. So I think they would be very happy with a Final Four appearance. Same with the Tampa Bay Rays. To me, I'm a guy that's always pessimistic on Tampa Bay. I don't ever consider them a true World Series contender. So for me, I just think a successful season for them is making it to the Championship Series. And if they want to earn my respect, I think they do have to make it to the World Series and potentially win it. But for me, I'm always considering them a regular season team. So I think a Championship Series outside of a COVID-shortened season would actually be successful for them, because I typically don't see them even go that far. Like, if you look at, what was it, 2022, like they lost to the Boston Red Sox when Tampa Bay, everyone thought was going to sweep the Red Sox or maybe make a gentleman's sweep. No, they got dominated by the Boston Red Sox in that series. And I feel like Tampa Bay, outside that 2020 season, when they come to the playoffs, no matter what their record is, always falls short. So if they just made it to the Championship Series, that would actually exceed my expectations for that franchise. So Final Four, please. Only has two teams, Seattle Mariners and Tampa Bay Rays. Then the final team I want to talk about for the tiers today, we'll do part 2 tomorrow where we finish our tiers, because we haven't even gotten to the D-backs yet. But my happy to be here tier. This is the tier of just teams that are like, listen, we don't need to make it to the World Series, but also we don't want to miss the playoffs. We just want to come in as a wild card team. Maybe we're in the worst division in baseball and we win our division with 90 games, but we're just happy to be here. We just want to make it in because we're a young franchise. I'm talking about the Cleveland Guardians, who, listen, if they made it to the Championship Series or World Series, that would also be great for this franchise. But after winning 92 games last season, if they won 82 games this year and missed the playoffs, it would be disappointing. So the Guardians are the only team I have in this tier, because they're the only team that I'm like, okay, they're just happy to be there. They don't want to miss the playoffs. That would be super disappointing, but they also are realistic and know they're not a Championship Series or World Series level team. So if the Guardians just made it to the first round of the playoffs, the wild card round or the divisional round, I think that would be more than enough for that franchise. And I think everyone would be happy in that scenario. Let's continue the podcast. And let's look at on the bubble. These are the teams that are right there, teams that could make the wild card or just miss out, teams I think are going to be around that 500 mark, potentially be above 500, potentially make the postseason as a wild card team, or just make it competitive in that last month of September. And the first team I want to talk about is the Los Angeles Angels. And look, I don't care what the naysayers are saying. I don't care what the haters are saying. I'm kind of not, I'm a little bullish on this Angels team. One, you got the two best players in baseball. ESPN just dropped their top 100 player rankings. Number 1 was Shohei Ohtani. Number 2 is Mike Trout. You still got the two best players in their prime. And honestly, the rest of that lineup for the Angels isn't too bad when you look at the Taylor Wards. Maybe get a bounce back from Jared Wash. You still got Anthony Rendon under contract. Like, I think their lineup is pretty solid. You got Ohtani. I think they signed Andrew Heaney this summer. Patrick Sandoval has looked good during the WBC. Like, I don't know if this is the year for the Angels. They still got Reed, the meters. I think that's one of their starting pitchers in their rotation, young guy, rookie from last season. So if their rotation, it's always to the pitching with the Angels, because with Ohtani and Trout in your lineup, you're probably going to have a top 5 lineup or better in the American League. But the pitching is always the question mark with this team. And the Angels, at the minimum should be a 500 team, but realistically, when you have the talent that they do, they need to be better. And considering this is a contract year for Shohei Ohtani, the Angels are not competitive on the field. Best believe Ohtani is looking at his options come the offseason. The second team I want to discuss here is the Minnesota Twins, who were on the cusp of making the postseason last year. Almost made it via winning the AL Central, arguably the worst division in baseball. Probably the worst in the American League. And the Twins, they probably got a little bit better. They traded for Pablo Lopez, which I like a lot. You got guys like you got guys like Joe Ryan on that team. I'm trying to think. I always get confused with the Twins and the Cleveland Guardians roster. So I'm making sure I'm not naming any Guardian players here. But for the Twins, they were around an 80-win team last season, around a 500-win team last season. And I do think they improved a little bit this year. Their rotation was really not very good last season. And Pablo Lopez, I don't think is a number one, but he's better than anyone that they had last season, mixed with the Joe Ryan from last season. And then you look up and down that lineup. If you could get a full season out of Byron Buxton with the Carlos Correas of the world and some other guys to come through as well, you have a makings of a potential division winner. I don't think this is really a team that could win, 92 games. I don't know if I see that in the Twins card, but could they win 88, 89 and win the division over the Guardians, who might be around that win total as well? I could see that for the Twins. Next is the Milwaukee Brewers, who I don't love this lineup. I'm not a big fan of the lineup. I think the lineup has probably just enough pieces with the Willie Adames of the world. You still got Christian Yelich there because it's really about the rotation for the Milwaukee Brewers because they still got Burns, Woodruff, and Freddie Peralta. And as long as you got that big three, you're always going to be a competitive team. You're always going to have that 500 record. The question is, can they score enough runs to give the run support to those starting pitchers that they have? Their bullpen, even after trading Josh Hader, to still be pretty good, led by Devin Williams. It's always going to be a question with the offense for the Brewers because they just don't have that offensive ceiling. Like the Brewers are probably like a rich man's version of the Miami Marlins, where it's not very good lineup, but a super stacked rotation. And if you could score enough runs, they could be in some games and you could be really feisty. But I don't think the Brewers are going to be a team that's really vying for the postseason. I think they'll just be one of those feisty, frisky teams that we see all year. They'll give playoff contenders trouble and probably play playoff spoiler come September, but they're a team that I'm not taking seriously as a contender or even a team that can make the playoffs, but they will probably be in the bubble. And with the final month of the season, they probably will be within striking distance of making the postseason. So that's why they're in this tier of on the bubble. This next team I want to talk about is a team that everyone listening to this podcast should probably love. The Arizona Diamondbacks are definitely a team on the bubble. Do I think they're going to make the postseason? I probably would say not, but do I think they could win 81 games, be a 500 team? I do. Do I think they have potential to win 85? Maybe even get to enough games to make the wild card, which the last couple of years has been about 88 games. Like I could see the D-backs. I think the best case scenario, the absolute peak of this team is around 88 wins and a wild card appearance. But for the most part, this is a season where you get a 500 record from the D-backs. Corbin Carroll looks like a stud. Moreno's showing flashes. Gallen stays healthy. A couple, one of your rookie pitchers or young starting pitchers like Dre Jameson or Ryan Nelson or Brandon Pfaadt, one of them really flashes and pops. If you get all that, McCarthy, shows last year wasn't a fluke. Alec Thomas has a little bit of a bounce back. Like a lot of things has to happen for the D-backs to reach their ceiling, potentially make the playoffs. But even just a few of those things happen, I think this is a 500 team. I think this team is going to improve on 74 wins that they had from last year. I think this is just a more well-balanced roster, a little bit more deep. And maybe they still don't have that supreme elite talent. Like they probably don't have too many stars on this team as it currently stands outside of Zach Gallen. We'll see if Ketel Marte could get back to stardom. We'll see if Corbin Carroll could reach in his full season of the majors, but they are just so deep with quality major league talent that I definitely like the D-backs as a team that could potentially make the postseason. And, we'll see if they hit their best case scenario. And if you want to bet on the D-backs making the playoffs in 2023, do you know where you have to go to place that bet? Because right now I think their over under for win total is 74 in FanDuel. Because speaking of FanDuel, that's where you have to go place that over on the D-backs win total on FanDuel, because right now the tournament is heating up and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. because new customers get a no sweat. Hold on one second. I was in the groove, but I forgot to put the overlay on for my YouTube audience. So let me start that one over because the tournament is heating up and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. They can bet on everything from the money line to point scorers and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. You guys know my favorite same-game parlay. Lakers are playing. AD 25 points, AD 10 rebounds, D-Lo 3 threes, and Lakers to win. I think that parlay hit against the Suns. So, if you want to make money, or if you at least don't want to miss out on money, don't miss your chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's get back into the podcast. I had a couple more teams in the on the bubble tier. So far, I've named the Angels, Twins, Brewers, D-backs. I got two more teams in this tier. Next thing I want to discuss is the Texas Rangers, who, like the Los Angeles Angels, because I know our guy, Silly Baseball, who we do the crossover with every Sunday, Monday, is not in on the Angels or Rangers this season because the Angels have sucked for many years with the Trouts, and now they got Ohtani's and still suck. And the Texas Rangers, they spent a lot of money, but they spent a lot of money on a guy who's injury prone, Jacob deGrom. So I know Silly Baseball is not in on either of these teams, but both of those teams I'm bullish on. I'm not saying either team is going to make the postseason, but I think I would take the over on both of their win totals on FanDuel because I do like this Rangers team. I think they're going to be in for positive regression this year because I think Corey Seager and Marcus Semien had fine first years in Texas, but I think your first year is always your worst year when you move to a new team. And I think a Semien, Corey Seager will be even better this year with the Rangers because that lineup is kind of deep with those two guys, plus Adolis Garcia, plus Nathan Lowe. Like, I like that. They're going to have Josh Young, the rookie. Look at that rotation. I don't think the rotation is too bad. Of course, injury concerns with the DeGroms, even the Nate Eovaldi's, but they added Nate Eovaldi. They added Jacob deGrom, and I think they even added one more pitcher probably, but you still had Martin Perez coming back. Like, I think they have a solid rotation, a really good lineup, and I like this Rangers team. I do think they get the over on the win total, and it would not surprise me at all if they stole a wild card spot. So the Rangers, I think, are a dark horse team and a team to look out for along with the LA Angels, but I'm not putting my name to any paper saying they're guaranteed to make the postseason. And the last team I want to discuss in this tier on the bubble is the San Francisco Giants, who are neck and neck with the D-backs. Locked On's power rankings have the Giants at 19, the D-backs at 20. My only quibble with the Locked On power rankings. But the Giants, I do think, will probably be around a 500 team. I just hate when people are like, oh man, well, we've seen the Giants before exceed expectations. Remember when they won 107 games just a couple of years ago? That was my goofy voice because anyone who brings up that season sounds like a goofy because it was a fluke when it was happening for the Giants, and they got I don't know if they got exposed in the postseason, but we knew they were never going that far. We knew they were just basically the NL version of the Tampa Bay Rays, where they had a great plan, analytics carried them far, but all those analytics and smart decision-making was just masking for the fact that they weren't very talented. And I still don't think they're super talented, but I do think they're deep in quality talent. I just don't think, like the D-backs, they just don't have a very high ceiling in terms of superstars, but your outfield of Peterson, Haniger, Conforto, like it could be a lot worse than that. Your rotation is going to have the Logan Webbs of the world and forget the Ross Striplings of the world. Like their rotation could be a lot worse too. And it is worse this year than it was last year because they let Carlos Rodon go, but they were just a smart organization. They got a smart manager. They know how to win ball games. And I do think they'll be around a 500 team, but I do think they will be behind the D-backs in the standings. Now let's move tiers and talk about the next one, which I have labeled as close, but not really. These are the teams that probably think they're in. These are the teams that think they're in the on the bubble tier, but really they're on the outside looking in. And could they have a scenario where they win half of their ball games? Sure. Is there even a world where they potentially make the postseason as a wild card? Yeah, but I would probably have it as like a 10% chance or less for these 3 teams to make the postseason. I think it's more likely that these teams finish with less than 80 wins. Like I see these teams in that 75 win range with a little sliver of hope that they could maybe get to like 87. Maybe that's enough for a wild card spot. But because these teams do have talent in certain places, I just think these are unbalanced rosters. And the first thing I want to talk about is the Chicago White Sox, who I don't hate the White Sox team because you're still going to have Tim Anderson, Luis Robert, Eloy Jimenez, Yoan Moncada. Like their lineup is still solid. Just gave out the largest free agent contract in their franchise history to Andrew Benintendi. They're still going to have a solid rotation of Dylan Cease, Lance Lynn, Giolito. The only issue is their guys get hurt way too much. Their outfield stays hurt. Benintendi has been kind of injury prone throughout his career. Yoan Moncada, I think, is already hurt. The rotation, Giolito had a down season last year. Lance Lynn is like 45 years old. Clevenger, don't even get me started on him. But Dylan Cease is no doubt a stud. So, like I said, there's legit studs on this White Sox roster. I just don't know how much I trust the rotation behind Dylan Cease. If you get a bounce back from Giolito and Lance Lynn is still good, that's major upside. The lineup, I think, is good. Like this team probably does have enough talent to be a 500 ball club or better, but the injury concern, I think, is just too big and too real for this team. So that's why I have to be more against the Chicago White Sox than pro Chicago White Sox. Just like the other Sox team in this tier, the Boston Red Sox, because the Red Sox, my favorite team growing up, and like the White Sox, they have some talent on this team. Like their lineup is going to have Devers, Justin Turner, maybe get bounce back from Verdugo and Kike. Just signed that Japanese position player, outfielder who just killed it in the WBC. Adam Duvall is not too bad. Christian Cassis can have a breakout season at first base. The rotation, I think, is really the struggle because I mean, Chris Sale, I love. He is a stud when healthy. The issue is he hasn't been healthy since they won a World Series back in 2018, which is now a half decade ago. They signed Corey Kluber to be in the rotation, who has not been good for a couple years. And then after that, it falls off pretty dramatically. So the Boston Red Sox, they try to improve their bullpen this year. I do think they have talent in their lineup, but the rotation, I just think, is too big of a question mark. So the Red Sox, I think, are pretty locked into around 75 wins and probably the worst team in the AL East behind the Baltimore Orioles. Oh, my God. I think I might have just realized I don't even have the Baltimore Orioles in a tier. I don't even know how I skipped the Baltimore Orioles. Now that I'm looking at my list, they didn't even crack my tiers. But if I did have to put the Baltimore Orioles on a tier, it would probably actually be on their own tier between on the bubble and close, but not really, because I think they have more talent, or I think they're just in a better position. I like the direction a little bit more of a team like of the Orioles than the White Sox or Red Sox. So I'll probably have them in their own tier between on the bubble and close, but not really. Orioles have a ton of young talent with the Adley Rutschmans and Gunnar Hendersons, and we might even see more rookies on the team this year. I don't think they're a team that's on the bubble vying for a playoff spot. I don't really see a scenario where they win 85 games, because I think that division will beat them up. But I also think they're better than the Red Sox or the White Sox or this other team that I have here in this tier. So I'm going to put the Baltimore Orioles on their own tier between on the bubble and close, but not really. And I'm sorry, Orioles fans, I forgot you in this tier ranking. And then the last team that we're going to discuss in this close, but not really tier is the Miami Marlins, who, like the Red Sox, they're kind of like the, I guess, bizarre Red Sox, because they have a really good rotation. Sandy Alcantara, Jesus Luzardo, Trevor Rogers, Edward Cabrera, Johnny Cueto. Like, their rotation is stacked, but their lineup leaves a little bit to be desired. They traded for Luis Arias from Twins. That was a nice pickup from them. Still have Jazz Chisholm, but after that, Jorge Soler, Avisel Garcia, Gene Segura. Like, I don't really trust any of those guys. I think this Marlins team is going to be competitive. I just think they're going to lose a lot of games, like 3-2, 4-3, just because they won't be able to score enough runs, and their offense won't be able to have enough production to back up those starting pitchers, which I think will be really disappointing. It might be just a frustrating season for Marlins fans, because you're going to be like, man, our starting pitchers dealing every single game, and every single game we can't muster more than 3 runs. A very frustrating feeling. And I'm sorry, Marlins fans, if you have to go through that this season. But right now, I think the Marlins are close, but not really. But I think in a year, they'll probably move up to this on the bubble tier. They just need one or two more people in that lineup. It doesn't even have to be a superstar. If you could just trade for another Luis Arias type, just someone of that caliber who you know is just an above average major leaguer that could put in some work at the plate for you. Even if it's like a Hunter Renfroe type, someone that just batting like 260 with 30 home runs and like a 790 to 810 OPS, someone like that, just all you need for this Marlins offense. So I like this Marlins team. I love their rotation, but the lineup has a little bit more to be desired. Just like if you desire to buy tickets, but you try to go through Ticketmaster or one of those apps, and it's confusing because buying tickets should not be stressful. And so many times buying tickets is stressful, and it shouldn't be. It should be a really easy process. And I always find that there's too many sponsors on these apps, and they always say lowest price guaranteed, but is it really? You can't cancel your tickets because then they won't refund you. Ticket people, these apps are usually disgusting, except for our new friends at Locked On Game Time, because Game Time, I think, is the best place for last minute ticket deals. And it's also the fastest growing ticket app in the country for a reason, because you get images of your seat before you buy. So you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps. That's it. And you're set. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. That's the most frustrating parts about tickets. You got to look through your email, might be sent to spam, then you click on it, redirects you to a whole nother thing. No. Game Time sending it right to your phone. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And that's not the only thing I want to talk to you. But first, I got to swap out my overlays for my YouTube audience, because the next thing I want to talk about is something that I'm really geeked out on, and something that I'm in a competition with my other Locked On hosts for money. I'm trying to put extra money in my pocket so you guys can help me out here, because I'm geeked out by our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game Ultimate Baseball GM, because this game is incredible. Because for someone like me, I dreamed of becoming an MLB GM, or just a GM in general, because I love managing my professional franchise. And this game is perfect if you're like that, if you're just like me, because if you have dreams of GMing, or if you love the idea of fantasy sports and you like running your team and trading players and signing players, then this app is for you, because you manage every strategic aspect of your team. You play through the season and you lead your team to glory. You're responsible for hiring the right coaches and staff, managing team finances, scouting and drafting players, managing difficult personalities, navigating a franchise through free agency, and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic game world. Ultimate Baseball GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. Right now, I'm in the league against my other Locked On hosts, and guess what? I'm kicking their booties right now, because none of them can build a team like me. I kicked their butts during the fantasy season, and now I get to do it through the Ultimate Baseball GM app. Now, if you want to do it with your friends, get everyone signed up, get their apps downloaded, and then you can play against your friends, and you don't even have to be online. So Locked On Diamondbacks listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code, or look it up on app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right. Let's get back into the podcast, and let's look at some more teams in tiers. And we just went through the close but not really tier, unfortunately, to the Orioles. Somehow I forgot yet. I'm really sorry that I did this whole exercise. I forgot to put the Orioles somewhere, but I do think they're on their own. I do think they're on their own tier of in between, on the bubble, and close but not really, because again, I don't think they're really trying to fight for the postseason this year, and they probably have enough talent to be on the bubble, but I wouldn't be surprised if they trade some of that talent at the deadline once again this season. But I also think they're better than close, but not really, just because those are the teams I think are going in the opposite direction, except for the Miami Marlins. I just don't think they have enough players in their lap to score enough runs. So sorry, Marlins fans. A lot of people are kind of bullish on the Marlins this year. I'm not. I think their rotation is going to be stacked. Might even lead the NL in terms of stats for pitching staff, but I think they also could lead the NL in all the bad categories for lowest scoring runs, the worst average, worst OBP for their offense as well. So enough on those teams and those tiers. Let's move on. The next tier I have here is he signed there. This is a one-team tier because this is for the team where it's like, whoa, this team is the land of misfits toys. Some of the players on this roster, you're going to be like, whoa, I didn't even know he signed there that offseason, because this is the Chicago Cubs, who I don't really know what direction they're in. They ended last season on like a 14-game winning streak, and I think they're trying to be more competitive this season. But I look at that roster lineup rotation, and I still don't like it. But the Chicago Cubs are fun and interesting because they got so many people on that team where you're just like, oh my God, I completely forgot he signed with the Cubs. Because Dansby Swanson, did you forget he signed a massive deal with the Cubs? How about Trey Mancini? Did you forget he signed a one-year deal with the Cubs? How about Eric Hosmer? Did you forget he signed with the Cubs? How about Cody Bellinger? They just have so many former All-Stars and current All-Stars and past their prime dudes. And it's like this Cubs team, I mean, they added a whole bunch of major league talent to their roster this offseason, which I think is good. But I still don't even think they're in the close but not really tier, because I don't like them as much as the Marlins, Red Sox, or White Sox. I don't think they're on the bubble. I think this Cubs team is not very good, but I don't think they should be in the worst tier, because I do think they're trying to improve and get better. I just don't like the way they're going about it. So the Cubs are in a tier all by themselves. Then the final tier on today's episode is the tank season tier. These are the teams coming into the season and say, you know what? It's not our year. It's okay. We'll go for the number one draft pick. The first team I want to discuss is the Colorado Rockies, who have locked into the worst team in the NL West, and their lineup isn't terrible. Chris Bryant, CJ Cron, Ryan McMahon. I don't hate it. They signed Moose, Mike Moustakas. They just signed Juraxen Profar. It's that rotation. Marquez, Fralin, Gomber. I know Senzatella. I think he's hurt. Like, I just don't like that rotation. I think their pitching just sucks. Their lineup doesn't have a very high ceiling. I do love CJ Cron, but I'm not in on the Rockies. I think they'll be in the cellar of the NL West. Excuse me. Cincinnati Reds are the next team we could talk about, because they still got old man Joey Votto. Excuse me. I don't know why I keep coughing. They still got old man Joey Votto. They signed Will Myers this offseason. Jonathan India is like a solid player, but a lot of people I haven't heard of before probably in this Reds lineup. Their rotation is just throwing young guys out there and seeing what they got. Hunter Green, he could throw a whole lot of fastballs, but is he really effective? We'll see. Nick Lodolo, we'll see how much he could do. Like, this team is just going nowhere. They're rudderless. They're just throwing out young players and seeing what they got. It's going to be a deep rebuild for the Cincinnati Reds. Hopefully it doesn't take too long for that fan base. Next up is the Pittsburgh Pirates, who I'm not bullish on the Pirates, but need to check their win total again, because I kind of think the Pirates could win like 72 games. Is that crazy? 73 games? I don't think this team is awful if they keep Brian Reynolds around for the whole season, because you have Reynolds, McCutchen, O'Neal Cruz, Carlos Santana, G-Man Choi, Brian Hayes. Like, that's not a terrible lineup. I think their pitching is awful. I think when you have a 45-year-old pitcher in Rich Hill as your number one starter, it's probably an issue. But I do think their lineup can score runs. I think the Pirates will be kind of feisty this year. Even though they're in the tank season tier, I don't think they're as bad as the Reds or Rockies. They're just probably going to be in last place, and so that's why the Pirates are in this tier. Next up, I have the Kansas City Royals, who, outside of Bobby Witt Jr. and Salvador Perez, not much going for them in their lineup. Perez is going to go very high in my fantasy draft because he's an elite catcher and just offense player in general. The rotation for the Royals, it's projected to be like Greinke, Jordan Lyles, Brady Singer, Ryan Yaubauer. I probably mess up his name. Brad Keller. Like, that's not a very good rotation. Royals, you're going to be in the mix for the number one pick once again. 2023, the team that is really on the hunt for the number one pick, and Sully Baseball is bullish on this team. I don't know why, because I'm on RotoChamp. I'm looking at their projected lineup and rotation. I think I literally know like 3 players. This is the Oakland A's. I know Ramon Laureano. I know Seth Brown. I know Jesus Aguilar. But when those are the 3 names I know, not going to be a pretty season for y'all. The rotation, I don't even know who this is. Oakland A's are a minor league baseball team. I am smashing the under on their win total. I don't care if it's 45 wins. I'm taking the under. The Detroit Tigers, definitely in this tier. You got Baez, who might opt out at the end of the season. Their offense was just so bad last year. Like, there was no quality offensive players. Like, no one on that roster last year you would have picked up for fantasy. It was that bad. Hoping Spencer Torkelson has a big bounce back because he's an ASU kid, Sun Devil. Whoop, whoop. Forks up, baby. So hopefully he has a bounce back. Riley Green, we'll see what he can do. He was a top prospect, but they're just not going. There's not much going for them. No more Miguel Cabrera, probably the most fun narrative. Or is he still around? I don't even know if he retired. I don't even remember. Whatever. Miguel Cabrera is old, even if he's still there. Whether he's there or not won't matter to the Detroit Tigers. And you look at the upcoming starters for the Tigers. Erod, Matt Boyd, rotation lineup, everything bad with the Detroit Tigers. And then last but not least, the Washington Nationals, who are another just minor league team, the NL version of the Oakland A's, because who's their best lineup? Who's their best position player in their lineup? CJ Abrams, Dominic Smith, Corey Dickerson. It's really disgusting. Their rotation, Patrick Corbin, Mackenzie Gore, Josiah Gray, like they're just throwing out young guys and minor leaguers and prospects. And so they're another team that you should not take seriously, and another team you should consider betting the under. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. It'll be the week before opening day, so a whole bunch of predictions dropping next week. We got to do our D-backs predictions for next week. So come back next week for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. Go catch up on any pods you might have missed this past week with Silly Baseball or anyone else. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.